I was 16 when I took my first job, not because it was trendy or because someone nudged me to try something new, but because I had no choice. My family was barely scraping by, and even though no one said it aloud, I could sense that I was becoming a financial burden just by existing. I didn't want to be that. So, I walked into a local diner with trembling hands, asked for a job, and started washing dishes the very next day. It wasn't glamorous, the hours were long, the pay was low, and I'd come home every night reeking of grease and detergent. But every dollar I earned felt like a step toward independence. I still remember the blisters on my hands, the stiffness in my back, and the way older coworkers would pat my shoulder, telling me, "You're doing good, kid." I didn't tell anyone at school I was working. I didn't want pity or questions. My grades dipped slightly, but I pushed through. At night, I'd study until my eyes hurt. There were moments I wanted to cry, moments I wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all, but I didn't. I kept showing up, one shift at a time, one test at a time, one day at a time. And slowly, something inside me changed. I wasn't just working to survive anymore. I was learning how to fight for something. I was discovering my own strength. There were no shortcuts, no saviors. It was just me, and that was enough. By the time I turned 17, I had saved up a decent chunk of money, not enough to do something big, but enough to not feel like I was drowning. I started budgeting with intensity, breaking every dollar into categories: college, rent, food, emergency. I tracked every cent on a notepad I carried in my backpack. My friends talked about prom dresses, vacation plans, and new phones. I nodded and smiled but couldn't relate. My life was different. I skipped outings so I could pick up extra shifts. I missed birthday parties to cover the Sunday breakfast rush. I didn't resent it, at least, not deeply. I just accepted it. This was my reality, and I wanted something better. College wasn't a maybe for me, it was a must. I applied for every scholarship I could find, wrote essay after essay late at night, and met deadlines with military precision. I didn't have guidance counselors helping me with applications. I didn't have parents proofreading my work. I had Google, determination, and sheer will. And when the acceptance letter finally came, a full ride to a local state university, I sat on my bed and cried for the first time in years, not because I was sad, but because for once, it felt like all my effort had led to something real, something tangible. I was going to college. I was going to change my life. University life was not easy. While other students partied and explored freedom, I worked nights at a campus coffee shop and weekends at a warehouse. I balanced textbooks with time clocks, lectures with labor. My classmates came in sleepy from late-night video games. I came in sore from unloading pallets, but I never complained. I knew why I was there. I wasn't just chasing a degree, I was chasing stability, dignity, a future. The professors noticed. One of them, a kind woman named Dr. Hopper, pulled me aside after class one day and asked if I was okay. "You look exhausted," she said, eyes full of concern. I told her I was fine, and I was, mostly, tired, yes, but more alive than I'd ever been. I was building something, slowly, painfully, but I was building it. Semester after semester, I kept going. I aced courses. I failed one or two. I retook them, and I learned from every mistake. I applied for internships and took every opportunity I could, even if it paid nothing, just to get the experience. Sometimes I'd sit in the library at midnight, holding my head in my hands, wondering if it was all worth it, but deep down, I knew it was. Because every morning I woke up with a purpose. Every night I went to bed knowing I'd inched forward, maybe not far, maybe not fast, but forward nonetheless. My final year of college was the most intense. The classes were harder, the pressure heavier, and I was juggling 2 part-time jobs to keep up with rent, utilities, and food. Financial aid covered tuition, but living expenses were on me. Still, I refused to ask anyone for help. I'd come this far on my own. I wasn't going to stop now. I found joy in small victories, when I finally paid off a semester's worth of books with money earned from a night shift. When I cooked a decent meal with cheap ingredients and still felt full. When I received an A on a project I completed during my 15-minute break at work. Some days, I walked into class in the same clothes I wore the day before, too exhausted to care. I became a master of using time efficiently, studying on buses, drafting essays during lunch, reading chapters between shifts, I had a checklist for everything, and a clock in my head that kept me from wasting a single second. It wasn't glamorous. I missed out on a lot of what people call the college experience. But what I gained was something more valuable: resilience. I had built a system that worked for me, not because I wanted to be different, but because I had to be. When graduation came, I didn't have a big cheering section in the stands. My parents weren't there. They had drifted long ago, disappointed that I didn't follow their version of success. But when I walked across that stage, cap slightly crooked, diploma in hand, I didn't think about who wasn't there. I thought about that 16-year-old kid washing dishes, counting tips, and dreaming of this very moment. I had done it. I had earned it, alone. After college, I faced the reality many graduates fear: finding a job that actually uses your degree. I had studied business administration, and I was determined to work in project management. But the competition was brutal. I sent out hundreds of applications, most with no response. Interviews were rare, and even when I landed one, I was usually told they were looking for someone with more experience. That phrase became a dagger. How was I supposed to have experience if no one would give me a chance? But I didn't get discouraged, not fully. Instead, I leaned on everything I had built. I expanded my resume to include freelance gigs I'd done on weekends, volunteered to lead a local charity event, and cold emailed managers at companies I admired, asking for informational interviews. It took 7 months, 7 grueling months, of odd jobs, unpaid internships, and rejection letters. Then one day, an HR manager from a mid-sized tech firm called me in for an interview. She had seen my application, but what caught her eye was a blog post I had written about managing finances while in school. "You seem like someone who knows how to work under pressure," she said. And just like that, I was hired as a junior project coordinator. The salary wasn't amazing, but it was enough. I had benefits. I had an office. I had a desk with my name on it. For the first time in my life, I had a steady paycheck that didn't come from tips or hourly shifts. I walked out of that building on my first day feeling taller than ever. My first year in the professional world was another kind of learning curve. The environment was different, the expectations unfamiliar, and I had to prove myself all over again. But if there was one thing I was good at, it was adapting. I learned to navigate meetings, mastered project timelines, and became known for being someone who could figure things out no matter what. I worked late without being asked, volunteered for extra tasks, and built relationships across departments. Slowly, I moved up. Promotions didn't come overnight, but they came. Raises, recognition, and a growing confidence that I belonged here. All of it was earned. I didn't splurge with my new income. Instead, I kept living like I was still that broke college student. I saved aggressively, tracked every expense, and set strict goals. I read books on investing, watched videos on real estate, and absorbed financial advice like a sponge. And 2 years into my job, I made a move I never thought would be possible so soon. I bought a small condo on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't huge or fancy, but it was mine, paid for with my money, no cosigners, no help. I remember standing in the empty living room after signing the papers, hearing my footsteps echo off the walls, and feeling this overwhelming sense of peace. This was what all those nights working, studying, crying, and pushing had been for. Not just the house, but the control, the independence, the fact that every square foot of that place represented a piece of me, built from the ground up. Owning a home changed how I viewed myself. It wasn't just a material accomplishment. It was proof that I had broken a cycle. In my family, no one had ever owned property. Most had lived paycheck to paycheck or relied on others for survival. I wasn't immune to their struggles, but I had forged a new path, one made of grit, budgeting, discipline, and painful sacrifices. My condo wasn't in a glamorous part of the city, but every detail in it was touched by my hands. I painted the walls myself, assembled second-hand furniture, grew herbs on the kitchen windowsill, and learned basic plumbing from online tutorials. Every weekend, I dedicated time to improving it, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I hosted a few friends occasionally, always careful not to overspend or impress anyone. My life wasn't about showing off, it was about sustaining what I had built. I kept my expenses low, automated my savings, and started a small emergency fund. I knew that comfort was temporary unless protected by strategy. I wasn't interested in flashy purchases or quick gratification. I was building something generational, something lasting. Sometimes I'd sit on my balcony in the evening, watching the city hum in the distance, and reflect on where I started. That 16-year-old dishwasher would have never imagined this, not because he didn't dream big, but because he didn't know it was possible. I wanted to reach back in time and tell him, "You'll be okay, just keep going." Even with a job, a degree, and a home, life didn't stop testing me. The pressure at work intensified as I moved up to a senior coordinator role. I was leading teams now, managing deadlines, dealing with clients. I faced imposter syndrome often, that voice inside whispering that I didn't belong here, that one day someone would find out I was just faking it. But then I'd remember the years of struggle, the jobs I juggled, the nights I survived on caffeine and hope. This wasn't luck. This was built, earned. I wasn't an imposter. I was experienced, not in the traditional sense, maybe, but in the kind that matters. I had managed more in my 20s than some did in a lifetime. I kept learning, reading, pushing myself to do better. I enrolled in online courses during weekends, not because my job required it, but because I had made it a habit never to stop growing. My network grew. I got invited to speak at a local college event, something I had never imagined. Standing in front of students, I told my story, not to boast, but to prove that it's possible to rise without handouts, that working hard, while painful, still has value. After the talk, a student came up to me and said, "You made me feel seen." I never forgot that. It reminded me why I kept going, not just for me, but for the version of me that still exists. In others, the silent strugglers, the invisible workers, the fighters who don't post their pain on social media but carry it like armor. Eventually, I paid off the last of my student-related expenses. Even though I had a scholarship, there were still costs: books, supplies, fees, housing. I tracked every debt and tackled it like an enemy. When I made that final payment, I took a screenshot and printed it. I hung it in a small frame on my home office wall. It reminded me daily, I owed nothing to anyone. I was free. That freedom gave me space to dream bigger. I started researching side hustles and investments, not the trendy ones people brag about online, but the ones rooted in patience and long-term thinking. I put money into index funds. I opened a high-yield savings account. I even helped a coworker build her own budget system. Slowly, the circle expanded. People started asking for my advice. I didn't consider myself a financial expert, just someone who had lived through it and survived. But that's what made people listen. I wasn't speaking from theory. I was speaking from scars. I thought about writing a book, maybe starting a podcast, or mentoring high school students who reminded me of myself. These weren't ego dreams, they were legacy dreams. Not everyone gets a clean start, but everyone deserves a fighting chance. And if I could be that tiny spark of guidance for someone else, it would mean more than any paycheck ever could. Life had come full circle, and for the first time, I wasn't just surviving or climbing. I was reaching back. By the time I turned 28, something inside me began to shift. For over a decade, I had been in survival mode, moving, working, building, fixing, learning. I hadn't slowed down. I hadn't taken a break, not really. And now that I wasn't drowning in bills or chasing qualifications, the silence became loud. For the first time in years, I had room to breathe, but I didn't know how. It was as if I had built a life I didn't know how to live inside. I'd sit in my neatly organized condo, debt-free, career on track, and ask myself, what now? It scared me. I had grown so accustomed to the grind, to the struggle, that peace felt foreign. I didn't know how to relax, how to celebrate, how to be still. I tried hobbies, painting, running, even cooking classes. Some clicked, some didn't. I started seeing a therapist, someone who helped me untangle the deeper roots, the fear of asking for help, the inability to trust that things wouldn't fall apart. I wasn't broken, but I was tired. And therapy taught me that rest isn't laziness, that I didn't have to earn every breath I took, that joy wasn't a distraction, it was a necessity. I started journaling again, not about goals, but about feelings. I learned to take weekends off without guilt. I took a solo trip to the mountains and just existed. I listened to wind in the trees, watched sunrises, cried without knowing why. And for the first time, I wasn't moving toward something. I was simply being. That was new. That was growth. As peace slowly settled into my life, I began reconnecting with family cautiously. Years ago, The distance had formed not out of anger, but misalignment. They didn't understand my choices, and I didn't feel safe explaining them. But now, with the foundation of my life firmly in place, I felt strong enough to open old doors. I called my younger sister, who had once idolized me but drifted when I refused to follow our parents' expectations. We talked for hours about childhood, about pain, about dreams. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. I even met with my mother after years of silence. She looked older, softer, like time had worn down the sharp edges. We sat across from each other at a small cafe, unsure of how to begin. She apologized first. Not for everything, but for enough. I didn't spill my entire journey that day, but I told her enough to make her cry. She said she was proud of me, even if she didn't show it back then. I believed her. Not entirely, but enough. Rebuilding relationships wasn't a mission, it was a choice. And I chose to give them a second chance. Not because I needed them anymore, but because forgiveness is freedom. I didn't forget the nights I cried alone, the birthdays missed, the cold stares when I made unacceptable decisions. But I wasn't angry anymore. I had grown too much to carry that weight. I wanted peace in every corner of my life, including the ones that once held pain. With stability in my hands and old wounds mending, I looked outward. I began volunteering at youth centers, not regularly at first, just when time allowed. I met kids who reminded me of myself, at 16, tired eyes, guarded hearts, dreams locked behind fear. I never told them everything about my past. Instead, I listened. I helped them with college essays, job applications, interview prep. I taught them how to budget with $10, how to find scholarships, how to write emails that get responses. They called me Miss Grit, a nickname that stuck. Every time I walked into that center, I remembered why I kept pushing through all those years, not just to own a home, not just to hang a degree on my wall, but to come back for others, to be the guide I never had. My impact wasn't huge or viral, but it was real. One kid got into a local college because of a last-minute essay edit I helped him with. Another landed a part-time job because I helped him build his first resume. These weren't headline moments, they were quiet victories, the kind echo for years. I didn't need applause or thanks. I just needed to know that the pain I went through could grow into something good, something healing. Life had given me scars, but now those scars were maps, not to avoid pain, but to walk others through it. With each passing year, my perspective widened. What once felt like survival had become stewardship. I wasn't just holding on to the life I'd built, I was nurturing it, protecting it, and using it to light a path for others. I started speaking more publicly, community panels, podcast interviews, online webinars for first-gen college students. Every time I shared my story, someone reached out afterward that felt like my life, they'd say, or, I thought I was the only one. And it made me realize that what I had gone through wasn't rare, it was just rarely talked about. So many people live lives like mine, quietly struggling, grinding, sacrificing, never asking for help, always walking that tightrope between enough and not quite. I wanted to break that silence. I began writing, not for attention, but for clarity essays, long-form posts, even the draft of a book. It was raw and vulnerable, and at times too close to wounds I thought had healed. But it felt right. My condo became my studio, my life, my content, not in the influencer sense, but in the truest form of storytelling as a tool for change. People began following my work. Local schools asked me to speak. Nonprofits requested my help. I remained grounded, always remembering the dish pit, the calloused hands, the nights of ramen noodles, and doubt. I never stopped budgeting, never stopped learning. Never stopped saying thank you to my younger self who dared to believe he could make it out. The world didn't hand me anything, but the world also didn't stop me, and that meant everything. Then came a moment I never expected. My workplace offered me a leadership position, a role that would require me to manage a team across departments and help shape the strategic direction of the entire company. It wasn't just a title, it was trust, authority, and impact. I hesitated. For days, I asked myself if I was ready. The old fear crept back in, the voice that asked, "Are you really good enough?" But I silenced it with the truth. I had always been. I accepted the role, and immediately, I knew I had stepped into the next chapter of my life. This wasn't about personal success anymore. This was about creating systems, opportunities, environments where others like me could rise. I changed hiring practices, advocated for paid internships, pushed for flexible schedules for part-time student workers. Every policy I influenced came from lived experience. My team flourished, not because I was a perfect leader, but because I led with empathy, clarity, and a relentless commitment to fairness. I also finally allowed myself to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I traveled not extravagantly, but intentionally. I visited countries I'd only seen in textbooks, walked through cities with nothing but a backpack and awe, journaled in parks, shared meals with strangers, and found pieces of myself in far-off corners of the world. I didn't post every moment. Most were private, quiet reminders that I was alive, thriving, and allowed to feel joy without guilt. I no longer needed to prove my worth. I was simply living it now. Standing at the threshold of my 30s, I look back with a kind of reverence, not just for what I endured, but for who I became because of it. I am not defined by the struggle, but the strength that bloomed in its soil. I still work hard, it's in my DNA, but I also rest, play, breathe. My home is filled with books, plants, laughter, and silence when I need it. My bank account isn't endless, but it's stable. My degree hangs framed in the hallway, next to a photo of me in my apron at that first dishwashing job. Every time I pass it, I remember that scared but determined 16-year-old. He had no idea where the path would lead, only that he had to take the first step. And now, here I am, not at the end, but in the middle of a story still unfolding. I didn't ask for help, not because I didn't need it, but because I didn't know how. Today, I do, and I offer it freely. My life is a testament to what's possible when grit meets vision, when pain is met with perseverance, and when someone chooses again and again to believe in something better. I don't have a perfect life, but I have a real one, built from the ground up, earned, not inherited. And if I could speak to anyone out there grinding, doubting, hoping, I'd say this: you're not alone. You're not invisible. You are building something that matters. And one day, you'll look back and realize you were always enough.